Identity V has been around since 2018, and even before that, it was already cooking in development as early as 2016. That is a long time. And with that much time on the clock, it is only natural that the devs went through a mountain of drafts, concepts, and what if we did this instead ideas. Some of those ideas got polished and released, some were recycled into something else, some were quietly archived, and others were abandoned, like your elementary school dream of becoming an astronaut. As it turns out, a lot of these early character concepts never actually saw the light of day. Most players never knew they existed at all. In fact, only a small number of people were even aware of them, despite the fact that many of these drafts have been sitting in the wiki this whole time, hiding in plain sight. Which is honestly kind of wild. So today, I want to share these early character drafts that never made it into the game. The forgotten ones, the could-have-beens. And if you watched my older video about Lucky Guy, some of these unused characters might already ring a bell, since I briefly mentioned them back then. But this time, we are not just name-dropping. Today, we are diving a little deeper into each of them. Before we do that though, let me clearly set the scope for this essay. Identity V has more unused concepts than I could reasonably cover in one sitting, so I need to draw a line somewhere. For this narrative, I will be focusing specifically on the characters documented in the wiki archives, since that is where my sources come from. This includes their character models, descriptions, bits of lore, and any other available details that survived the cutting room floor. Well, folks, let's dive in. 2016 was a golden year for asymmetrical horror games, and a huge part of that credit goes to one particular title that made the whole 4 survivors running for their lives from one very angry chaser formula explode in popularity. That game was Dead by Daylight. While Dead by Daylight was not the first game to introduce the 4 versus 1 asymmetrical horror concept, its release in June 2016 inspired a wave of developers to jump on the trend. In the years that followed, similar games began popping up everywhere, from Friday the 13th in 2017 to the Texas Chainsaw, Mass Elimination, since I am definitely not allowed to say the other word, Home Sweet Home, and many more. NetEase was quick to notice this growing demand. As early as July 2016, just 1 month after Dead by Daylight's release, NetEase, through the NetEase Game Academy, decided to develop their own take on the genre. The goal was to reach a broader audience rather than catering exclusively to fans of graphic horror. The result was a game called Dangerous Game, a horror title that still featured blood and gore, but wrapped it all in a much cuter and more stylized visual package. However, Dangerous Game was never meant to stand on its own. It was a prototype, created primarily as a training project for developers who were preparing to work on something bigger. That something bigger would eventually become Identity V. Between 2016 and its official release in 2018, Identity V went through multiple development and testing phases, and one of the biggest changes happened to the game's setting. Early in development, the world of Identity V leaned heavily toward a modern era. Over time, though, the developers made a decisive shift and placed the game in a late Victorian setting instead. And that decision changed everything. A new setting meant old ideas no longer fit. Designs had to be scrapped, reworked, reused, or quietly abandoned, and character concepts were some of the biggest casualties. Many characters that were already in development no longer matched the tone or aesthetics of the game and were either heavily modified or cut entirely. Some survived in altered forms, evolving into characters we recognize today, like a stylish survivor named Michael George, who was eventually repurposed into the much more mysterious Eli Clark. Out of all those early concepts, only one character managed to survive development largely intact and make it into the final game as a playable character, and that was Lucky Guy. Now that we understand how and why these scrapped characters came to exist in the first place, a very natural question remains. Just how many of them were there, and who exactly got left behind? Well, that's where we'll be going next. Players who experienced Identity V before the Ashes of Memory update in 2022 might remember that the tutorial used to be very different from what we have today. Back then, the tutorial was set as a continuation of Orpheus's story. He would read a specific diary, and we, as the lucky guy, were thrown straight into the experience. Alongside the lucky guy was another survivor, a quiet figure wearing a white shirt and brown pants. This character is what the community later came to call the Slacker. The Slacker was a non-playable character who existed only within the old tutorial. In that sequence, he teamed up with the lucky guy to decode the final cipher machine and attempt an escape from the arms factory, all while being chased by Smiley Face. During their escape, both characters witnessed the magician being brutally taken down by Smiley Face. Just as freedom seemed within reach, Smiley Face appeared once again and blocked the Slacker's path. The result was predictable and unfortunate. The Slacker was punished, while the lucky guy managed to escape alone. Because of this outcome, some players jokingly referred to the Slacker as the unlucky guy. Other nicknames also surfaced, such as Stranger One, or even the Man in the White. However, according to internal files, this character originally had a proper name. He was called Michael George. During the early beta, he was planned to be one of the 4 main characters, alongside Lucky Guy, Graveyard Girl, and Stranger B. Since the game was still set in modern times at that stage of development, his modern outfit fit right in. Once Identity V shifted its setting toward the Victorian era, though, characters like the Slacker no longer fit the vision. As a result, Michael George, along with several other early concepts, was quietly scrapped from the game. I am still genuinely confused about why this guy was ever called the Paparazzi. By definition, paparazzi are freelance photographers who chase celebrities just to take their pictures. Cameras, lenses, flash, photography. This man, however, shows up with none of that. Instead, he is carrying a syringe and a suspicious collection of vials, which immediately raises several questions, and none of them are about photography. At this point, calling him a paparazzi feels wildly inaccurate. A doctor would make more sense. A drug dealer would make even more sense. And a guy you should absolutely not meet in a dark alley would make the most sense of all. Well, at least, according to one source, the explanation is even simpler. He was not a paparazzi at all, but a drug addict. No debate. Case closed. Job title confusion aside, this character did have an actual name. He was called Cameron Victor. Fashion-wise, he wears a dark newsboy cap, a light brown coat over a black shirt, and a pair of brown pants that look so worn out. As previously mentioned, he also carries a syringe and some greenish vials with an unknown purpose. And sadly, we will never know what those were meant to do, because this character was scrapped during the beta testing period. The funniest part is that Cameron Victor did not even completely disappear. According to certain sources, this extremely questionable concept was later remodeled into a much more respectable character. Yes, this man may have evolved into the Doctor we know today, Emily Dyer, which means that somewhere in Identity V's development history, the Doctor's family tree includes a very confusing paparazzi with no camera and way too many syringes. If you have ever played the prologue of Identity V, there is one scene that is hard to miss. Detective Orpheus is riding in a car, flipping through a case file assigned to him. His task is to find a missing girl, and tucked inside that file is her photograph. What many players do not realize is that the girl in that photo is almost identical to one of Identity V's scrapped characters, known internally as the Graveyard Girl. The Graveyard Girl was originally planned to be one of Identity V's main characters. However, much like the Slacker, she did not survive the beta testing period and was eventually cut from development. Her design leans heavily toward a modern aesthetic. She wears a red jacket over a gray shirt, paired with blue jeans and black shoes with white laces. An alternate version of her design even shows her wearing an orange tank top. All of this strongly suggests that she belonged to the early phase of development, back when the game was still set in a modern era. Even after being scrapped, traces of the Graveyard Girl remained in the game. Her most notable appearance can be found in the prologue, where her design was repurposed as James Reichenbach's missing girl. Beyond that, she also appeared in an early promotional video for Identity V. In that footage, she is shown entering what appears to be the arms factory, noticing a group of creepy hanging dolls and eventually becoming a doll herself. Aside from these brief appearances, the Graveyard Girl effectively does not exist within the game. She survives only as a reused asset, a promotional ghost, and a reminder of what Identity V almost was. If you are into Naib and have really gone down the rabbit hole with his lore, then you probably know that he was not originally designed with doll eyes. In his earliest concept, Naib had real eyes, and I am not going to lie, he looks more like a jump scare than a design choice. This detail was actually mentioned in his design notes, so tracing the origins of this version is not particularly difficult. This early version of the mercenary appeared briefly during the beta testing period before quietly disappearing, which makes him one of the earliest characters to be conceptualized for Identity V. When you compare this beta version of Naib to the one we have today, there are surprisingly few differences. Aside from the nightmare fuel eyes, most of his core design was already there. Interestingly, during beta testing, Naib was not even called a mercenary. His original codename was Nightcrawler, a detail that can be found in his design notes. You see this guy? Yes, that one. That is Servace Leroy, the magician. Except, during the beta period, he was not Servace, and he was definitely not a magician. In fact, his job back then came with a much more intimidating vibe. That character, who looks suspiciously like the magician we know today, was originally called the Gangster Leader. His name was Lorenzo Mortezi. Yes, at one point in Identity V's development, the magician was apparently not meant to entertain anyone, but to shoot people with a Tommy gun instead. Quite the career pivot. Jokes aside, all of this information can actually be found in the magician's early design concepts. Those same notes reveal not only that he was once planned as a gangster leader named Lorenzo Mortezi, but also that his outfit was inspired by Newt Scamander. And if that name sounds familiar, it is because he is the main character of the movie Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. So yes, somewhere in the development of Identity V, the devs clearly watched Fantastic Beasts and thought, what if this guy was a gangster? And, well, that explains a lot. Not many people know this, but one character who looks suspiciously like the mechanic was originally intended to be named Emma Woods. Yes, that Emma Woods. And no, this is not a joke. Back in development, Emma Woods was actually the codename for a character who strongly resembles Tracy Resnick, except with a completely different job. At the time, Emma Woods was not a gardener, and she was not a mechanic either. She was planned to be a female driver. The female driver was originally meant to be a playable character, but she never made it to release in that form. Instead, her entire concept was repurposed into what eventually became the mechanic. According to available information, the developers struggled to keep the female driver as her own character because they could not settle on her personality. She was pulled in two different directions. One concept portrayed her as a young girl fascinated with tinkering and small machines, while the other imagined her as a capable and professional repair technician. When the team could not decide between the two, they ended up merging the ideas. The younger, tinkerer vibe won as the visual inspiration, while the technician role became her actual gameplay identity. After several revisions, this fusion slowly evolved into the mechanic we know today. If you are curious about what the female driver looked like, you do not need to search very far. The mechanic's original outfit is exactly the same design that was planned for her. That said, according to the mechanic's design notes, there were also alternative outfit options floating around at the time, proving that even this character went through multiple identity crises before settling down. Wouldn't it be cool to have a Mountaineer as a playable character? Honestly, I still think about that even now. Yes, we already have Kurt Frank as the explorer, but come on, climbing mountains and shrinking in books are not the same thing, right? And interestingly enough, this was not just a random fantasy. Back in the beta days, a Mountaineer was actually a real concept character. Sketches of her design even existed. And her name? Well, Emma Woods. Again. At this point, Emma Woods was clearly going through several alternate timelines during Identity V's development. This Mountaineer version of Emma Woods was never released and disappeared into the depths of the planning stages before the late beta period. Today, her existence can only be confirmed through wiki archives and scattered sources across the internet, if you are willing to go digging for them. In terms of appearance, she was honestly pretty cute. The Mountaineer wore a blue mountain jacket paired with brown trousers. She also had a set of headphones and what appeared to be a radio, which immediately raises questions. Was she a climber? A full-time radio man? Or maybe a member of an artillery company serving as a signalman? Well, who knows, eh? Perhaps her skills would even have involved calling for backup or relaying information to teammates. Unfortunately, we will never find out. The Mountaineer never made it into the game, leaving behind only concept art and a lot of wasted potential. And yes, I am still quietly wishing that one day, Identity V finally gives us a proper Mountaineer. Female Guard. Yet another character who is sent straight into the abyss before Identity V ever saw the light of day. And honestly, she is kind of adorable, which makes her occupation even more confusing. I mean, what kind of guard wears a brown hoodie and looks more like a huggable teddy bear than someone you would actually be afraid of? This immediately raises questions. What exactly was she guarding? A secret? Her own precious memories? Or maybe she was guarding the game's ping, desperately trying to stop it from flying into the clouds like it usually does. And of course, her name was, well, Emma. Emma Woods. Again. Unfortunately, there is very little information about this character beyond her name, her occupation, and her visuals. And those visuals really do scream hug me more than security threat. That said, I kinda thought that this concept may have later inspired one of Meliplinius' skins. But officially? Who knows? Because, like many other early drafts, the female guard remains a cute mystery that never made it past the planning stage. Any Hellember mains have probably noticed this one already, since this hunter technically still exists in the game today. The twist is that he is no longer his own character. Instead, he lives on as one of Hellember's skins. But back during development, this design was never meant to be just a cosmetic. He was planned to be a full-fledged hunter, known as the Ascetic Monk. This character was named Cliff by the developers. He was intended to be released as a hunter during the early beta period, back when the game was still experimenting with a modern-era setting. Once the game shifted direction, Cliff no longer fit the vision. Rather than being released as a playable character, he was quietly removed from the roster and repurposed into a skin for Hellember. According to information from the wiki, this decision was made before the first public test, sometime before September 2017. What makes Cliff especially interesting is his apparent inspiration. His design strongly resembles Pinhead from the Hellraiser horror movie franchise. The idea of a hell-themed, pain-adjacent hunter clearly had some influence here. Even more surprising is that Cliff was given a bit of lore, although it is confusing to say the least. According to available descriptions, Cliff is described as a hunter from hell. Whether this was part of his original character background during early development or something created later, purely to justify the cosmetic, remains unclear. Either way, Cliff stands as a reminder that some Identity V characters did not disappear entirely. Some of them simply changed form and waited patiently in the wardrobe. Another hunter who was scrapped and later turned into a costume is the puppet, named Billy. This character was conceptualized around the same time as the Ascetic Monk, sometime during the early beta period, and was removed before the game entered its first public test in September 2017. Unlike the Ascetic Monk, Billy was never given a clearly defined backstory, though that has not stopped fans from speculating. One popular theory connects Billy to Moonlit River Park. This idea comes from a figure of him that can be found in the area. However, this connection is shaky at best, since Moonlit River Park is filled with figures of various characters who have absolutely nothing to do with the map, including Bane and Haster. So this may simply be a case of aesthetic decoration rather than lore. Another theory ties Billy to the Red Church. This belief comes from an unused, localized name for the costume, which was Groom. Considering that the Red Church's lore revolves around an abandoned church and a wedding ceremony that ended under mysterious circumstances, the connection is tempting. That said, it is worth noting that groom outfits are also commonly associated with ventriloquist performances, which muddies the waters even further. In the end, we will probably never get a definitive answer. Billy was scrapped as a character and repurposed into a skin for Hell Ember, leaving his story unfinished and open to interpretation. What many people do agree on, however, is that Billy the Puppet was likely inspired by another Billy the Puppet, specifically the one from the horror movie Dead Silence. Unlike the previous two hunters, who never appeared in the game outside of being skins, this one actually made a brief on-screen appearance. Moonface does exist in Identity 5, just not as a playable or standalone character. He can be seen in the lawyer's story, where he appears in the manor's dining hall, seemingly ready to attack Freddy. Before being repurposed into a skin for Hell Ember, Moonface was originally designed as his own hunter. During development, he was known as Mike. The description associated with the skin suggests that Mike was someone who hunted his prey under moonlight, though it is unclear whether this description reflects his original lore or was written later specifically for the skin itself. That said, his inspiration seems fairly obvious. Moonface is widely believed to be inspired by Michael Myers from the Halloween franchise. With that in mind, it is easy to imagine that Mike was originally intended to be a classic slasher-style killer. Now, finally, we arrive at a character who is arguably a fan favorite, yet whose development history is far messier than most people realize. Very few players know that this character was completely overhauled before release. And yes, I am talking about our French guy, the composer. He is French. Trust me, he said it himself.
I'm sorry to say that I'm French. Forgive me, but I wish to rest a while longer.
The composer, Frederick Kreiberg, was designed at a very early stage of development. However, his release depended heavily on the progression of the main storyline, which is why the developers held him back until his story was ready. This explains why he did not appear until Season 24. Naturally, this raises an interesting realization for me. If Frederick was designed early but released much later, then what exactly did the original version of the composer look like? And so, for a long time, this detail sat quietly in the corner of my mind. That was until I went digging through the wiki and stumbled across something interesting. A scrap survivor named Romeo Pucci. Romeo Pucci was described as a musical instrument store owner from Venice in northern Italy, which means that before Frederick was French, he was Italian. Well, congratulations, Frederick. You technically have an Italian sibling somewhere in the development archives. According to Romeo's old file, he was a skilled salesman and highly proficient with musical instruments. Ironically, despite working with them every day, he had little love for music itself and avoided playing the instruments he sold. This behavior was speculated to be tied to a troubled past, as certain memories would resurface whenever he heard the sound waves of his tuning fork. Eventually, Romeo closed his shop and left behind a note stating that he was heading to a certain manor in England. Based on his initial concept art, Romeo Pucci also referred to as the Tuner, appears to have been developed around the same time as the earliest survivors, possibly even before Identity V was released to the public. In other words, he was old, very old. His planned release was tied to the time of reunion storyline, which itself suffered significant delays. The wiki does not specify exactly when Romeo Pucci was heavily rewritten and reworked into Frederick Kreiberg. What it does confirm is that in December 2022, all remaining assets related to the Tuner were replaced with those of the composer, complete with a new name, new background, and a new role in the story. When Season 24 finally arrived, the Tuner was officially gone, and Frederick Kreiberg took his place. Whether these characters were deleted outright or completely rewritten, one thing is very clear. Identity V goes through an extensive amount of reworking before releasing a character. This process exists to refine gameplay, strengthen the narrative, and ensure everything fits within the game's evolving vision. Sure, there are still things worth complaining about when it comes to the storyline, but at the very least, these careful revisions are the reason we can still enjoy the world of IDV as it stands today. I have included the source links in the video description, and if you want to add some more context, you are more than welcome to do so in the comments section. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time!